Hello and welcome back to the Fit Positive podcast. I am just getting over a tummy bug that I had last night, so you have to excuse me if my thoughts and words are not very coherent today. I hope I can get through it. We'll see how we go. This is part two of our mindset series. So we did part one last week, and last week we focused on self-limiting beliefs and using essentialism as a tool for prioritizing our time and time management. So if you haven't checked out the first part of this series, go back and listen to that first and then come back to part two. And today we're moving on to talk about habit psychology. So how to build habits that last, sustainable habits. And we're also talking about tools for stress management. And we all know we're dealing with a lot of stress in midlife, and we are just a little bit less capable of dealing with it as we lose our estrogen and progesterone, which are instrumental in helping us manage stress. So we're going to bring in some tools to help us here with that. And the first thing we're going to talk about is habit psychology. So I have lots of tips. Most of these tips come from James Clear. I'm holding up a book if you're watching this. His book, Atomic Habits, is so good, absolutely excellent. And a lot of the Fit Positive method is using the science that's presented by James Clear in Atomic Habits. So he brings together all of the science. It's not all his science, but he's an author who did an excellent job of bringing together that science. So I'll go through some of the tips for building habits that last now, and it's all based on his book. So you could read that if you want to go into more detail. I'll leave the link for that book in the show notes. Okay, the very first thing we need to focus on when we're trying to establish a new habit into our lifestyle is mastering the art of showing up. So we want to master the art of showing up for the first few weeks of my program. That's what I say to everybody. The first couple of weeks, we're just mastering the art of showing up. What does that mean? That means we're picking a time and a place when we're going to do, for example, our workouts is one habit. So we're going to take up strength training. The first thing we want to do is pick a time and a place for the strength training and master the like show up for those at that time and that place for your strength workout. Within the workout itself, it does not matter what you do, as long as you've established the routine of showing up for yourself. Then, once you've mastered the art of showing up, then you add intensity later. So you don't want to try and do everything all at once. You just want to try to, first of all, establish the habit into your routine. So we're not going for the perfect workout. We're not going for the perfect day of eating. We're not maybe trying to hit 10,000 steps on the first day. We're picking one habit, just one. The next thing we want to do after that is size the habit. When you first start out, you want to size the habit nice and small and bite-sized and doable so that it can be this small, non-threatening habit that you're not scared of, you're not dreading, especially at the beginning. And of course, you add intensity later. I always talk about the importance of lifting heavy weights. We're not doing that at the start. At the start, we're just maybe doing 10 minutes of a workout and maybe it's only body weight only. And that's going to mean that the habit is non-threatening, doable, and we'll keep showing up for it. We want to make it as easy as possible to keep showing up for that habit. So size it accordingly. So for a walk, it might be just a 10-minute walk up and down the road. For a meal, maybe we're just talking about breakfast because that's the easiest, smallest version of the habit that we want to establish. So this bite-sized focus keeps you engaged without overwhelming you. And overwhelm is one of the biggest reasons for people giving up on their healthy habits. And once these habits feel manageable, that's usually a good sign that they're going to stick. So you don't want to be going into a new program or a new workout routine saying that was so hard, because it's unlikely that it's going to stick if you find it that hard to start with. Size it down, make it easier, scale it back and make it doable. And then you'll keep showing up, and that's how you establish consistency. Another tip is called habit stacking. And this came from a behavior scientist called BJ Fogg at Stanford, who talks about stacking a new habit alongside an existing one or on top of an existing one. So the existing one is something that's already automated. Like coffee for me, I love my morning coffee. So I will always have my morning coffee. That's already automated. It's kind of like a hack to automate the new habit is to tack it on to the one that's already automated. So if you want to start drinking more water, for example, Force yourself to have a glass of water before you have your morning coffee, and that will help you automate the water habit because the coffee habit is already automated. And automating habits just takes decision making out of the equation. And when decisions disappear, you lose excuses because there's no decision, you're just doing it. Once there's a decision point, you have an opt out option, and you don't want that. You want to just be doing it without thinking. So, habit stacking is a way of removing that decision point and automating the habit alongside the other one. The next tip is to build a tribe. Well, he says build a tribe. It's also known as build a community or join a community because habits are deeply influenced by the environment and the people around us. So if you were trying, for example, to, bring in healthy habits and you're hanging around with people who love to socialize and go out drinking and eating out all the time, and they really don't care about healthy habits and they think that you're a bit nuts if you take up a healthy habit, it's it's less likely to succeed, you know. Uh, what we want is to belong to a community where the behavior that you're trying to create is normal in that community. And then it becomes normal for us as well. That's why it's so powerful to join like an online community like what we have or a gym where your desired behavior is already the norm, whether it's movement, healthy, balanced eating, or rest or consistency. I know in my community, we all talk about the same things. We're all talking about how to improve our sleep. We're all sharing meals and recipes that we enjoy. We're all sharing photos from our walks. And that just helps us all feel like these behaviors that we're trying to create in our lives are the norm for everybody else in this community. So they'll quickly become the norm for us as well. And that really works. The science shows that this works. So belonging removes friction. The next tip is to remember your why. We talk about this all the time, but habits last when they're meaningful. And if your why is just to look good for a wedding that's coming up in a few weeks, that's great and valid. But could it be more meaningful? Could your why be a bit more meaningful than that? So my why is more about my long-term health and longevity and being here as healthy as possible for as long as possible so that I can support my kids rather than having them support me in my old age. That's my goal. And that's a very strong why. So when you feel your motivation wane, you can come back to that why. If it's really meaningful, it will keep you moving forward. Because once you're very crystal clear on what matters most to you, everything else becomes easy. You know, all of the things you need to do to achieve that goal are no brainers. Okay, the next tip is make it fun. If you're not enjoying the thing that you're trying to do, it is not going to last. And I think about this all the time with our meals that we bring into the app. Like, we always love our food. I would not ever add a recipe to the app that I don't love myself or that my family doesn't love. And so enjoying your food, for example, makes it much easier to stick with healthy, balanced eating. If you're going on a really bland, boring diet in order to lose weight, it's not going to last. There's just no way. So it needs to be enjoyable. The food needs to be enjoyable. The workouts need to be enjoyable. If you work out so hard that it's no longer enjoyable, you won't keep coming back to it. If you're going for walks and you find them really boring, how can you ask yourself, how can I make this more enjoyable? And for me, I got a lovely new warm coat at Christmas because the weather here in Galway is pretty miserable, especially in January. So I got a lovely warm coat that, it's just, I love wearing it. And so I put that on. It makes my walk so much more enjoyable. I also listen to podcasts when I'm on my walk, or I go for a walk with a friend. All of these things are an example of making the habit that could otherwise be a little bit boring, a little bit more enjoyable. So enjoyment isn't optional. It's a must if you want your new habit to last. Okay, the last tip for habits is adjust to your season. And this is especially important in midlife. What worked for us at 21 is no longer going to work. And that's just reality. We have so many moving parts in our lives at this point that we need flexibility in our plan. We don't need a rigid plan. But if you have a flexible plan, it will allow you to scale the habit up or down according to what is going on, whether you have work stress, family responsibilities, a poor night's sleep, or just general demands, being made of you. You need to have flexibility in your plan so that you can adjust things up or down according to all of those things that are not necessarily predictable. So adjust to your season, whether it's your season in life or your season of the year. Like in the winter months, we might just do a lower number of steps, fewer steps versus what we do in the summer, so we're adjusting up and down according to what is going on in our lives rather than an all or nothing approach, which is I can do this rigid plan or I can't. You know, we need to move away from that. And that would have been the type of approach that I took in the past, 100%. But this is the way that works best now, flexibility. And it's just no all or nothing. I was 100% all or nothing when I was younger. Now it's never all or nothing. It's how far can I push it today? Maybe tomorrow is going to be different. Flexibility is absolutely critical. Okay, so there are all the tips on habits. And as I say, I'll link the book in the show notes, Atomic Habits by James Clear, which goes into all of these tips in more detail. And we go into this in our mindset masterclass on my program, and we have a mindset guide, which goes into it in more detail as well. So if you remember, you can read that. And the next thing we're going to look at is stress management and a few tools for stress management. A lot of the time people can go, oh, I don't have time to add another thing to my morning routine or my bedtime routine because I need to bring in mindfulness or meditation into the mix. It's not that. It's really just about finding ways to have tools that we can lean on in times of stress. As I mentioned, because of the lack of estrogen and progesterone in perimenopause and menopause and beyond, we can have more difficulty managing stress. So we do need to know about the tools and use them where possible. So mindfulness is a term that's bandied around a lot, but what does that actually mean? So mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. And that was defined, that term, by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. And what does that mean? It just means, on purpose means we're consciously directing our attention. In the present means noticing right now, what's going on right now in the present moment. Like noticing when your mind wanders and gently bringing it back to what you're focusing your attention on. And without judgment means without labeling it as good or bad. I can't, my mind, I have ADHD, my mind is crazy, absolutely crazy. A million things go on in there. I could be very judgmental of myself because I have done a lot of meditation over the years. And I loved when they said, if your mind wanders, that's okay. Just notice it and gently coax it back. It's not think about nothing or you're a complete failure. you know, it's like, it's okay. Your mind is going to wander, but the key is to notice when it does, not judge yourself when it does, and just gently bring it back to the thing that you're focusing on, whether it's just your breathing or the nature around you if you're outside or whatever it is. So you really want to be doing mindfulness throughout the day. You want to be noticing what's going on around you all the time instead of being caught up in your head, worrying about a particular problem or trying to solve a problem. So I find mindfulness really powerful when it's combined with meditation. So I do a short daily meditation, not daily. Most of the time I try to do it. And it's a 10-minute meditation on the Calm app. It's called Daily Calm, and it is a guided 10-minute meditation. And I listen to it before bed. Sometimes I listen to it in the morning, and it just calms my brain before I want to go to sleep or before I want to start the day. And so that's great, but you want to carry that through your day. So the way you carry it through the day then is to try to be a little bit more mindful as you go through your day. So an example of being mindful through the day might be, instead of constantly listening to podcasts, which I usually do, the odd day, maybe once a week, I'll say, I'm leaving my headphones at home and I'm just going to walk and notice everything that goes on around me. So that's being mindful while I'm on my walk. It's not meditation. It's not a strict practice. It's just being aware of what's going on around me instead of caught up in my head all the time. But I find that I'm better at doing that when I have done some kind of meditation. So I really love that Daily Calm in the Calm app. It's very basic, very simple, 10 minutes long. If you're big into meditation, you might find it too simple, but for me, it's just right. And it's, again, it's sized according to what I'll always be able to do. I can always fit in a 10-minute meditation in my headphones just before I go to sleep. So meditation trains the skill, and mindfulness is how you use it throughout the day. So that's how the two things work together. Let's talk about now the autonomic nervous system. So, physiologically, what's happening in our bodies when we're stressed? So, the science around this has evolved over the years, and now we know that we have an autonomic nervous system, which is a part of our nervous system that acts automatically. Like our heart keeps beating, our lungs keep expanding and contracting. This is all controlled by the autonomic nervous system, which works automatically without us having to consciously do anything. But it has two branches. One is a sympathetic nervous system, and this is the part of the nervous system that helps us fight or flight. So it's when we're stressed, the sympathetic nervous system kicks in and helps us to fight if we need to fight, or flight if we need to flee something. And, historically, it was used if you were being chased by a tiger or something like that in the wild. Um, and then we have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is for rest and digest. And this kicks in automatically when we're resting or digesting or relaxed. And these two things just kick in really without us knowing, without us consciously controlling them. We can feel like we're stressed without knowing we didn't decide to be stressed. It just happened. And same thing when you relax and you fall asleep. Sometimes this just happens, without us trying. And that's fine if those two parts of the nervous system work the way they're designed to work. But what's actually happening nowadays is that we're getting into the sympathetic state more often, and almost for some of us, it could be constantly. We're constantly feeling low grade anxiety, a little bit of stress, worried about something, but not sure what we're worried about. This low grade anxiety means that the sympathetic nervous system is kicked in, switched on, and we need to do something to switch that off. But the whole thing is automatic. So, how do we switch it off? Well, we do have a tool to be able to manually switch from the sympathetic nervous system, this fight or flight, to the parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. We can create that relaxed state in ourselves. And so one of the tools that we can use to do this is resonance breathing. It's a breathing technique that's used to slow the breathing down. And we actually do this in our workouts at the end of our workout, because we can get into an intentional place of stress when we're in a workout. And at the end of it, we want to consciously get out of that stress state, because your muscles don't grow in the period of stress. The muscles grow when you're actually resting. And so we want to make sure that we completely switch off that stress state at the end of a workout and switch on the rest and digest. And we do that through long, slow breathing. And the ideal is that you have like 5 to 7 breaths per minute. And it can happen in lots of different ways. But one of the ways that I do it is I breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 2 seconds, and breathe out for either 6 or 8, depending on what I'm able for. So in for 4, hold for 2, out for 6, or out for 8. There's lots of different tools out there. There's another one called box breathing, which is in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Do whatever you feel good doing, but just make sure that your breathing is slowing right down. That's the goal, because then that slows the heart rate down. That's the manual switch that we have to slow the heart rate down. Slowing the heart rate down gets us out of that stress state and into a rest and digest state. And it works all the time. And often, I talked about this in the sleep episode, but if we're waking during the night, often we wake up feeling anxious. And the way to get back to sleep is to reduce that anxiety, get out of that stress state. And the way to do that is by doing this resonance breathing. So in for 4, hold for 2, out for 6 or 8, if you can manage it. And you will fall back to sleep. You will get relaxed. It works all the time. I used to do it before a big presentation at work when I was working in IT. I would go to the bathroom and do this breathing technique for a couple of minutes. and I would feel so relaxed going into my presentation. It just works every time. So anytime you feel stressed at all, you can do this. It doesn't matter where you are. You could be just driving the car, um, anytime at all. Just try it and see how relaxed you get. And also, the meditation and the mindfulness will help you notice when you're stressed, because often we're in this stress state all the time without even realizing it. And for me, when I was working in IT, it wasn't the job. It was just that I was in a state of grade anxiety all the time, worrying about the next problem, the next problem, the next problem. And it wasn't until I had a conversation with somebody who said, my manager, and he was like, have you heard of this term, low grade anxiety? I feel like this is a common thing in our world. And I was like, low grade anxiety? I definitely have that. And that's what it was. And I could have stopped that in an instant by doing these breathing techniques. I just didn't have the tools at the time. So just because we're in midlife and we have more stress in our lives doesn't mean that we have to just suffer it. We have tools that we can use to better manage that stress, whether it's before bed or at a time when you're stressed, or um, just in general in the morning before you start your day, whatever it is. Just know that you have these tools in your tool belt and you can use them as needed. Maybe you don't feel you need them at all. And if you don't, that's great. So that's it for today. Habit psychology is so critical. And I think all of us can do with, remembering those little tips around mastering the art of showing up, sizing your habit to keep it small to begin with and grow it over time. Size it up and down according to, your season in life or your season of the year or how busy or stressed you are in your work. Stack habits smartly around things that are already automated. Make sure to surround yourself with the right people. Build a tribe or join a tribe that already exists, and use the tools that are available to you to manage your stress in a way that works for you. Because we know we do not need to do more. We need to do less, but better in order to thrive and reach our health goals in midlife. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. I will see you again next week, and you'll see more details of the Fit Positive programs in the show notes and the link to Atomic Habits.